Are you fascinated by the strange and mysterious in our world? Do you find yourself drawn to odd and unusual events or peculiar historical moments that aren't talked about in the history books?
Do you feel as though you have a connection to forces or specters unseen, or that you're not entirely alone in the woods when you go for a hike? Do you think there could be something more out there?
Well, strangers, do we have the podcast for you? I'm Christiana.
And I'm Bree.
Welcome to Something Strange, a podcast covering strange stories ranging from the supernatural, the paranormal, weird history, folklore, and more.
From cryptids to real-life historical figures, from hauntings to peculiar happenings, there's a story here for you. Tune on in the first and third Fridays of each month for our main episodes. But if you can't get enough, check out our mini episodes on the fourth Fridays of each month.
We're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Audible, and YouTube. And for even more strange content, check us out on our socials: Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok.
For now, strangers, it's time for us to part ways.
Remember to tune on in.
We'll be right here with Something Strange.
Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that Down the Crooked Path is researched and recorded in Niagara Falls, Ontario, on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Attawandaron, and the Mississauga of Credit First. This land has been home to Indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and we recognize their enduring connection. We are grateful to share these stories on their lands that carry their histories, and we encourage our listeners to reflect on the past, present, and future of the land they call home. Welcome, wanderers, to Journey Down the Crooked Path, a place where the stories are stranger, the shadows stretch longer, and the things that go bump in the night might just be listening. I'm Amanda Joy, your guide into the eerie, the forgotten, and the downright bizarre. Here, we step off the well-lit roads of Canadian Creepies and venture into the murky corners of history, folklore, and the unexplained, where the whispers grow louder and the truth is never quite what it seems. So let's take a deep breath, watch your step, and whatever you do, don't look back. Once you start down the crooked path, you never know what might follow.
Nyctophobia, the fear of the dark. At some point, haven't we all had a reason to fear the darkness? Those spaces in between where light doesn't follow. For the most part, the dark is empty and shapeless. Nothing lives there but the creatures stirred by our own imaginations. But there are certain places in the world where things really do live in the dark. Things like history, haunting, and horrific. And in those places, those things that lurk in the dark might just reach out and grab you. The Niagara region has a history steeped in horror and antiquity, from the blood-soaked hills of the War of 1812 to the links to the revolutionary Underground Railroad. There's no shortage of ghost stories across its 12 municipals. But when it comes to darkness, two places stand out from the rest. Train tunnels that offered passage to travelers, farmers, and pedestrians on foot, while trains thundered. Today, these tunnels are no longer used the same way. Today, these tunnels are corridors of stillness that echo the horrors of the past. Burrowed just off of Warner Road, tucked behind a tangle of brush and limestone outcropping that doesn't look like much until you're standing in front of it, is Screaming Tunnels. There's no sign or gate or plaque, just a break in the trees and a mouth in the stone. The entrance is low and wide, framed by weathered rocks that have shifted over time. Some are cracked, some are moss-covered. Today, graffiti scars most of its walls. The tunnel itself runs beneath a set of train tracks at a slight angle with high arched ceilings. It's not very long, running about 124 feet or 38 meters, and stands about 16 feet tall. The floor is uneven and damp, often flooded slightly in the spring and fall from a natural runoff. Even in midday, light doesn't travel very far inside this tunnel. But sound does. Footsteps echoing off the limestone walls. The effect can make your own footsteps sound like they're coming from someone else. The tunnel was originally constructed sometime in the early 1800s, although no one seems to agree on the exact year. The tunnel was built as a drainage channel, plain and practical, a means to keep the valley from flooding when the rains came hard and the runoff had nowhere to go. It was constructed from a limestone quarry nearby, and when the Grand Trunk Railway laid its tracks overhead, the tunnel found a second life. Farmers used it to cross beneath the trains, leading livestock through the damp corridors when the rail line was too loud or busy. Wagons rolled through, wheels clattering against the uneven floors. Children would even play here, splashing in the shallow puddles. Once upon a time, it's said that a farmhouse once stood in the field behind the tunnel, isolated and weather-beaten, set back far enough that most people wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. While the land was quiet, the house was not. Story goes that the father drank and was abusive towards the mother. Often the curtains would stay drawn to keep the arguments behind closed doors. One night, the mother finally decided to leave. She packed her bags and waited for her husband to pass out before trying to leave. But she didn't make it past the front porch. But their daughter did. Through the fields, barefoot, past the trees, she ran for the tunnel that led to the main road. It was the only way out. She was so close to safety, making it halfway through the tunnel before her father caught up to her, gas can and match in hand. And although the tunnel was damp, it wasn't wet enough to stop what came next. As the young girl was set ablaze, her screams echoed through the stone, sharp enough to carry past the tracks and into the valley. They say that the house burned down not long after. Some claimed it was an accident. Others say it was the father finishing what he had started. The foundation is there somewhere, buried underneath weeds and broken branches, and you can find it if you know where to look, with its cracked stones and blackened soil. Other versions of the story say that the house caught fire before the girl ran for the tunnel, that she woke to the house in flames, and while trying to flee, her clothing caught alight. Some say that she ran into the tunnel, but the flames consumed her life by the time she reached the middle, her screams for help echoing off the stones. In a lesser-told, darker variation, the young girl was a victim of a violent assault, and her body set ablaze in the tunnel to hide the crime. You can argue about the details, whether she ran from a burning building or was chased by her abusive father, accident, or something far worse. The story always ends the same way: a young girl alone in a tunnel, flames licking at her clothes and smoke curling against the limestone, and her blood-curdling scream tearing through the stone like they're trying to claw their way out. No one ever rewrites that part. Today, most will tell you that the girl never left. It's believed that her spirit stayed inside the tunnel, burned into the limestone, waiting for someone to light a match so she can find her way to safety. Others say she waits in the field, watching for a match to light the tunnel, searching for her home that no longer stands. Over the years, a ritual has become associated with the story. Maybe it started as a dare between kids or whispered at sleepovers, but it is said that if you go into the tunnel at midnight, stand in the center and light a match, she will return. Some say that if the match stays lit, you're safe, but if it goes out, she is with you. She blows out the match or candle, and her screams once again bounce off the walls of the tunnel, loud enough to drive a person crazy. Originally known as the Merritton Tunnel, Blue Ghost Tunnel was built for the Grand Trunk Railroad in 1876 near Thorold, Ontario. Longer than Screaming Tunnel, this limestone passage stretches about 713 feet beneath the Old Welland Canal, which holds a tragic history itself. With a vaulted ceiling and narrow passageway, it was constructed to allow trains to pass underneath the canal between locks 18 and 19. Its construction was overseen by Francis Shanley, a prominent civil engineer whose family had already made their mark on Canadian railway infrastructure. It operated regularly until 1915, when the last official train passed through under the guidance of engineer Harry Eastwood, and after that, it was used sporadically by farmers transporting cattle or seeking shelter from weather. Today, Blue Ghost Tunnel is in a state of forlorn decay, partially submerged, gated off, and closed to the public. But that hasn't stopped people. Its entrance is tucked behind brush and a rusted fencing near the old canal. It's easy to miss unless you know exactly where to look. One end is completely flooded, and the other is sealed off, littered with warning signs to deter urban explorers and ghost hunters. The limestone walls are slick with algae, and the air is so heavy with moisture, it's nearly thick enough to taste. The tracks are long gone, but the stonework remains, arched and cracked, streaked with mineral runoff and covered in graffitied, layered over decades of trespass. The ground is uneven and littered with debris and the remnants of old tires. Despite its condition, the tunnel still draws people, mostly paranormal groups searching for the supernatural with gear loaded in backpacks, although some come with just a flashlight and a gamble. The algae faintly glows in the dark, giving the space an unnatural sheen, and a blue mist often rolls in, and when it does, the temperature drops and EMF readers spike. And with its history, it's easy to understand why it feels, or is, so haunted. Since its erection, the tunnel has had over 100 recorded deaths, from cave-ins and drownings, the building of the surrounding canal system, and industrial accidents. Not to mention, the tunnel sits near an abandoned cemetery. The excavation of the tunnel beneath the Third Welland Canal was a massive project that demanded intense manual labor. Hundreds of workers, many of them young, worked tirelessly with picks and shovels and rudimentary blasting techniques to carve through the Queenston limestone. A young boy, about 14 years old, whose name was never preserved in official records, was working near the tunnel's entrance when a section of rock gave way. He was crushed instantly. He is one of the many deaths during the tunnel's construction, many of which were never formally recorded. In later years, on January 3rd, 1903, at approximately 7:03 a.m., the Grand Trunk Railway engine number 973, a light mogul locomotive, was departing from Niagara Falls and was headed west towards Hamilton. Meanwhile, engine number 4, an express train, was scheduled to pass through the Merritton Tunnel at 6:28 a.m. Whether due to a miscommunication or a scheduling error remains unknown, but the two trains found themselves on the same track, barreling towards each other at full steam. The collision occurred roughly a third of a mile from the western entrance of the tunnel, and the impact was devastating. Both of the engineers survived, although they suffered broken limbs and facial injuries, but the firemen, however, were not as fortunate. Charles Harding, the fireman aboard engine number 4, was killed instantly. His body was found jammed between the boiler and the coal tender, so tightly wedged that when rescuers attempted to remove him, his limbs detached from his torso. His wristwatch was still ticking when they found him. Abraham Desault, fireman on engine number 975, was thrown into the boiler of his own locomotive. He suffered severe burns over 90% of his body and was rushed to St. Catharines General Hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries roughly 5 hours later. The wreckage took hours to clear. The tunnel and surrounding tracks were shut down temporarily, and the incident was widely reported, but luckily, no other passengers died. As if crashes and accidental deaths aren't enough to have spirits linger, perhaps a forgotten cemetery is. Near the tunnel, with a name forgotten by time, was once a cemetery dating back to the mid to late 19th century. There are no official records confirming its name, nor does it appear on any modern maps or municipal registries. But what does remain of the cemetery is the scattering of old gravestones, some broken, some half buried, others jutting out at odd angles, hidden beneath the overgrown brush. Oral history would suggest that many of the graves belonged to laborers, transient workers, or individuals without wealthy families, so essentially a potter's field. Its origins are tied to the canal's expansion between 1872 and 1878, when hundreds of men were employed to excavate and construct the locks, tunnels, and railways that transformed the region. It is believed that some of the graves were relocated when the canal route shifted, but others were left behind, either forgotten or deemed too difficult to move. Visitors today report seeing gravestones near the tunnel's entrance and along the wooded path that leads to it. These stones often appear after heavy rains or frost heaves. It's as if the earth is pushing them back into view. There is a lot about Blue Ghost Tunnel that makes it spine-tinglingly eerie. But how did it actually get its name? For decades, this was just another piece of industrial infrastructure, functional, damp, and largely forgotten after its closure. But in the early 2000s, a paranormal investigator named Russ went searching for screaming tunnels and ended up here by mistake. He returned several times, drawn to the tunnel by its eerie acoustics and overall sense that something wasn't right about this place. On one visit, he captured a photograph near the entrance, and in this photograph was a misty, vaguely human-shaped figure, tinted with a faint blue hue. And although the image has never been officially verified, it became the catalyst for the tunnel's new identity, transforming the site from a forgotten piece of railway and into one of Ontario's most infamous haunted locations. The site draws onlookers, paranormal investigators, ghost hunters, and locals alike, all in search of their own blue ghost photographs. Reports claim that at night, a blue mist or vapor twists near the entrance, especially on cold, damp nights. Some claims that the mist moves against the wind or that it vanishes when someone approaches it. Balls of light have frequently been reported as well, sometimes blue, other times white, drifting through the tunnel or hovering near the ceiling. These lights have often been captured on camera and are considered one of the more common paranormal phenomena of the site. Another recurring figure in local lore is a woman in white, seen walking near the tunnel or standing motionlessly near the inside. Her identity is unknown, but she's often associated with the nearby cemetery and the tunnel's tragic history. Inside the tunnel, people have heard footsteps, whispers, and even music echoing through the stone. These sounds often occur when no one else is present, and they don't match the acoustics of the space. Some describe the music as old-fashioned, like a distant phonograph. Paranormal teams report EMF spikes, battery drains, and temperature drops, especially near the tunnel's center and entrance. These shifts are sudden and localized, adding to the sense of unease.
You. Yeah, you. Still haunting the same old fast fashion? Time to dig up something better with Back from the Dead Goods, a Canadian small business where forgotten threads get a second life and sustainability meets spooky. This isn't just upcycled clothing, it's resurrected fashion with an eerie edge. Handpicked, reworked, and revived, every piece is as unique as a ghost story whispered at midnight. And because you're a part of the Canadian Creepies family, you get an exclusive deal. Use code Canadian Creepies at checkout for 10% off. Find them lurking on Instagram, Etsy, and Poshmark. Links are in the episode description. Give your wardrobe a second chance at life, if you dare. Once upon a time, in the land of everyday moments, there lived a sprinkle of magic called icing sugar photography. From sticky cake smash smiles to wind-swept yes moments, they capture the sugar-sweet, the beautifully messy, and everything in between. Whether you're a blushing bride or a blooming family, or just want to freeze time for a second, icing sugar photography is your fairy god lens. Visit icingsugarphotography.com and follow along on Instagram at icingsugarphoto. Let your story sparkle, because life is sweet and memories should be too. Looking for your next obsession? The Creators Collective Podcasts is your gateway to the dark, the chilling, and the downright fascinating. We're a community of independent podcasts with one goal: to share the best in true crime, paranormal tales, folklore, and unexplained mysteries. Whether you crave cold cases that won't stay closed, haunted histories that refuse to be forgotten, or stories that make you sleep with the lights on, there's a show waiting for you in the collective. And when you join us, you're not just listening to one podcast. You're stepping into a world of creators who love this stuff as much as you do. Check out the Creators Collective today. Follow the link in our show notes to discover your next favorite podcast. We'll be waiting for you. All right, creeps, real quick. If you've got a Canadian business or project that you want to reach our spooky little corner of the podcast world, we've got ad space available on Canadian Creepies. And hey, if you're an artist, activist, podcast host, musician, writer, content creator, actor, or just someone with a strange or chilling story to tell, we'd love to hear from you too. We're always open to collaborations with folks who vibe with our creepy, curious little corner of Canada. Email us at CanadianCreepiesPodcast@gmail.com and let's get weird together.
And multiple accounts described a ghostly dog roaming the tunnel or its entrance. Witnesses say that it appears suddenly and then disappears without a sound, although sometimes growling and scratching noises have often been reported, despite no animals being present. This apparition ties in stories from the construction of the tunnel, when it was rumored that some workers had buried dogs inside the walls of the tunnel as part of early superstitions that dogs are guardians of travel. In various areas across the world, dogs would sometimes be buried in the entrances of tunnels or bridges as a way to protect travelers from evil spirits or misfortune. And then there are others who believe that this was just a way to dispose of animals that died during the canal's expansion. Others still claim that the ghost dogs are buried in the adjacent cemetery. There are some paranormal interpretations that believe spectral dogs are a type of residual haunting tied to traumatic events or emotional imprints left behind. Trains and tunnels are the perfect breeding ground for haunted folklore. They're passages between towns and between worlds, and sometimes between life and death. Trains are massive, fast, and unforgiving. And in the 19th and early 20th centuries, they were symbols of progress, but also of violent accidents, crushed bodies, and unmarked graves. A single misread signal could kill dozens. Firemen were burned alive in their boiler explosions. Workers were mangled during couplings. These deaths were often quick, brutal, and impersonal, which makes them perfect for ghost stories. The soul doesn't get closure when the body is torn apart by machinery. But trains also carry emotional cargo, farewells, reunions, escape, And when someone dies on a train or near the tracks, the folklore often paints them as restless, still trying to complete their journey. That's why you get legends of phantom trains, ghost conductors, and spectral passengers who vanish when spoken to. Tunnels, on the other hand, are liminal spaces. They're neither here nor there. They're dark, enclosed, and often underground, which makes them feel separate from reality. You enter one on one end and emerge somewhere else, changed. That's the architecture of folklore: transformation, uncertainty, and danger. Construction deaths in tunnels were common: cave-ins, gas leaks, drownings, workers buried alive. And because tunnels are hard to access and harder to maintain, many of those deaths go unmarked and unmemorialized. And that creates the perfect storm for a haunting. Unresolved trauma plus forgotten history plus eerie settings equals ghosts, does it not? The Screaming Tunnel and the Blue Ghost Tunnel may share geography and atmosphere, but their hauntings are born of different wounds. One is steeped in personal tragedy: a girl, a scream, a fire that never exactly went out. The other is industrial, mechanical, a place where steam and steel collided with flesh and bone. The Screaming Tunnel echoes with grief. The Blue Ghost Tunnel hums with residual violence. Their stories diverge in origins, but converge in tone, because tunnels and trains are more than settings. They're thresholds, liminal spaces where history compresses, where sound distorts, where death feels close and time feels wrong. It's no wonder these places attract folklore. They're built to carry things forward, but they never quite let go of what's left behind.